So today we're going to be working on the removing things from photos assignment, and for that we're going to be looking at the spot healing tool and the clone stamp tool. And so for this assignment we have 4 photos that you will need to download, and once you download those from the assignment online, then they should show up in your downloads. So when I first open Finder here, if you're using a Windows computer or a Chromebook, this will look a little bit different, but you'll want to open Finder or your File Explorer on a Windows computer, and we're going to look at the downloads here. And so I have all 4 photos downloaded, and so I want to keep that a little more organized, so I'm going to put them, if you're using a computer like a Windows computer or a Mac computer, you can organize those on your computer because that is where you're going to be storing them. You can always back them up to Google Drive in that case, which I really suggest once you finish editing these. But if you are using Photoshop where your photos are saved on your computer, you want to keep those pretty organized. So I am going to open a new window for Finder. You can do the same thing for the File Explorer on Windows computers. When you have one window open, in order to get another one open, you can just do Command or Control N for a new window. And so I've done that here. I'm going to go to my documents where I have my photography folder. And I already have this folder here. I'm actually going to delete that so I can make a new one. So I have my photography folder here, and in that folder I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm going to call that removing things. For this assignment, I can go highlight the photos that I want, and I'm going to put that in that folder. So now I know for sure where I have them saved, and so then when I go to open Photoshop, I can get those easily. So I have those there. If you are using a Chromebook or anything that you're using the virtual desktop at cte.nsd.org, if you're using that on your computer to edit photos in Photoshop, then you will just need to upload these photos that you download from the assignment, and you'll need to upload those to OneDrive. So if that's the case, you'll want to go to onedrive.nsd.org, and you'll want to log in and upload your photos here so that you can access those photos through Photoshop on the virtual desktop. So I'm going to do the same thing I did on my computer, and I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call that removing things, so that things are organized. And then in that folder, I'm going to go and get the photos that I need to edit. So they should be called 1 removing things, 2 removing things, 3 removing things, and 4 removing things when you download them. They should keep that same file name throughout everything we do when we're downloading them and uploading them. It'll take a moment to load those, and then when you go to cte.nsd.org for the virtual desktop, you can open these in Photoshop. On my computer, I'm going to be just using it on the Photoshop that's on my computer, but once you have them open in Photoshop, no matter which method you're using, it works the same. So I'm going to go up to File and Open, and put my window over here. And so I'm going to go back to my documents and my photography folder where I have my removing things folder. And I'm going to go ahead and open all of these. You can do them one at a time as well. I'm just going to go ahead and open all 4. So we're going to start with 1 removing things and move on to 2, 3, and 4. They start out a little more simple, so you want to do them in this order. They start out a little more simple and then they get a little more complex as we go. So we want to start with the number 1, removing things. And so for this photo, we're going to start out with the spot healing brush. So that tool is the one that looks like a band-aid, but it also has this little dotted line of a circle in the corner. If it doesn't have that little dotted line, that's the healing brush tool. We want the spot healing brush tool. So if for some reason it's not on the right one or you're not sure about it, you can hold it down. So click and hold on that button and make sure it's the very top one, the spot healing brush tool. The shortcut for that is J, so if you're on any other tool and you want to jump to this tool real quick, you can just push J on your keyboard and it will jump to the spot healing brush. So for this photo, we are going to be using this tool to remove the 2 leaves and the slug in the photo. So when you're using the spot healing brush, you can adjust a couple things up at the top here. You can adjust the size to be the right size for whatever you're editing. I usually try to keep it about this size for these size things, maybe a little bigger for the bigger leaf. But you don't want it to be super big and take up a lot of the photo. You want it to be a little smaller than what the item is that you're removing. You can also change the size with the bracket keys on the keyboard, the ones that look like boxy parentheses, the ones to the right of the letter P on the keyboard. So the one to the right makes it bigger, and the one to the left makes it smaller. And then you don't have to keep clicking up here to change the size, but you can do that up here. You can also adjust the hardness. So if you go to 100%, it'll be a little bit like a cookie cutter. It'll have really distinct hard edges. But if you go all the way down to 0, it'll have really gradual fuzzy edges. And so with a spot healing brush, that helps us make it really gradual and look really natural. So I'm going to put mine all the way down to 0%. And it looks like my brush size is about 200. So with this tool, it's really simple. You just click and hold and drag over what it is that you want to remove. So in this case with the leaf, I'm just going to paint over the edge and then fill in the middle. And you can tell that the edges of this brush are a little fuzzy and gradual, and that's going to help us make it look real natural, and it's not going to be super obvious that we removed something. Sometimes there's little bits that remain that it copies from other areas, and that's totally fine. We'll just go over it a little bit. You can also use this brush as just to click with little dots if something is real small, or you can click and drag. But now it looks like that leaf was never even there. And then with the slug, I'm going to make it maybe a little bit bigger since I made it smaller in the end there. And I'm just going to click and drag over that. And what this tool does is it just calculates all the areas around the area that you're painting on. And it's calculating what all those things are around it and filling it in with those things. So in this case, it's looking at all the grass and the clovers that are around the objects we're removing, and it's filling it in with those things that are around it. So I'm just filling in this, making sure I have that all painted over, and then let go of the mouse, and it will think for a second and then remove that. You can always go in and touch up anything else if you like, any of these kind of dead pieces of grass. And now it just looks like a photo of some grass and some clovers. So I'm going to want to save this. I'm going to go File, Save As, Save on my computer. And I'm just going to say edited after this so that I know that this is one that I've edited. It's going to go back in that removing things folder, and I'm going to click save. And then OK on this window. So that's saved back in the folder where I got it. And then for the second photo here, this one we're going to focus on the clone stamp. So the clone stamp tool can be used to remove things, but also add things from other parts of the photo as well. So for this photo, we have some light bulbs that have burnt out, and we are going to replace those with the ones that are here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the clone stamp tool. It's the one that looks like a little stamp. And we want to make sure it's that top one, the clone stamp tool, not the pattern stamp tool. So we're going to click on that top one. And the shortcut to that is S. So especially if you're going back and forth on a certain photo between these two tools, if you have it on the spot healing brush, you can just push S on the keyboard and it will jump to the clone stamp. So if you're using both of these, you can just push J and S and J and S as you're editing, then you don't have to keep going back over here and selecting it. So we have the the clone stamp tool selected. Oops. And you may notice if you just go and click on something, it will say that it could not use the clone stamp because the area to clone has not been defined. So what you want to do is you want to make a selection of where you want to take a sample, and then you want to paint that on where you want that thing to be. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit with my Command or Control plus so that I can see this a little bit better. And let's say I want to take this light bulb here and paint it onto this one so it looks like it works. So I am going to maybe make my brush size a little bit smaller, maybe about that, maybe a little bit smaller than that light bulb. And I'm going to go hold down Option on my keyboard. I'm using a Mac, so that is Option on a Mac. It is Alt on a Windows computer. I believe it's the same thing on a Chromebook. It is Option or Alt. So Alt on Windows and Chromebooks, and Option on Macs. So you can tell when you hold down that key, it will change it from a brush to a little crosshair selection kind of cursor. So I'm going to hold down Option or Alt, and I'm going to make a selection about in the center of that light bulb. And then I'm going to, after I click and make that selection, I'm going to let go of that key on the keyboard. It goes back to being a brush, and you can kind of see the outline of that selection that I've made. So now I'm going to go over to this light bulb here that's not working, and since I made the selection in the center here, I'm going to make this I'm going to start painting that selection into about the center of this light bulb. So I'm going to line that up about the center, and then I can click and hold on the mouse and paint that. I'm just going to move around a little bit as I hold down the mouse. And so what that did was it took this one here and it painted it over the top there. You can technically, if you make a selection again, you could add more light bulbs. If I wanted one here, I could add another one. It's just taking that selection and painting it on somewhere else. Just in this case, we're painting it on strategically to be where these burnt out light bulbs are, so it looks like the light bulb that's there is working. And so for each one that you do, you want to make a new selection. If I kept painting that on somewhere else, it's going to start continuing to copy that selection over to the side of it, and it's going to start taking some of this wall texture and other parts of the photo. So if I hold down Option or Alt again, let's say I want to copy this one and paint it over the top of this one. I'm going to hold down Option or Alt, make a selection about the center there, go over here, and hold down and paint that on. So if I kept going off to the side, you can see it has a little plus crosshair selection area where it's telling me where it's selecting that from. So if I kept going, it would keep moving over and over and continuing that selection. So it can make things a little weird if you keep going. So we want to make sure for this photo, we're just doing that right over where we want to put the light bulbs, and we keep making new selections for each one. You can use this tool for the later photos that we're going to be working on for this assignment to make different selections and use it over bigger areas. But for this, we're just using it on very small areas. So I'm going to hold down Option or Alt, select this one. Actually, I like the angle of this one a little better. So I'm going to select this one here, paint it over the top here, hold down Option or Alt, select this one, let go of that Option or Alt key, and then paint it on over here. So now we have all the light bulbs and they all look like they work. So I'm going to go ahead and save this file, save as, save on your computer, to removing things, edited. It's in my removing things folder, it's still a JPEG, and I'm going to click save. And OK. So now we have our plain patch of grass, we have our sign that works, and now we have another little area in a yard. And if I'm still on the clone stamp tool here, you can tell that it still has that selection from that other photo. So if I use the clone stamp tool in this photo, I need to make a new selection. So for this photo, number 3, we want to use any combination of the spot healing brush and the clone stamp. So these tools work really well together in a lot of cases. Every photo is going to be different that you edit with these as far as what works best for certain areas. And so for this one, we're going to use a combination of them. So I can start out with the spot healing brush since it's the more simple tool. And I'm going to just go over these leaves, see if that works for that area. That looks pretty good. Maybe touch up a little of the corners here. If it ever looks kind of fuzzy and kind of unnatural or copies an area that you didn't want it to, you can always undo by doing Command or Control Z, or going up to your history and clicking on any of the previous steps to undo. And if you click on the open one or this image at the top, that's the original image when you first open it. I'm liking the way that's looking, so I'm going to tuck that away. Use the spot healing brush for these leaves since it seems to work pretty well for them. And then I also want to remove this little dirt patch, this little molehill, and it's a little bit bigger, so I'm thinking I'm going to use the clone stamp for that. And it still has that selection from that other photo. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to hold down Option or Alt. And I could select up here, but it looks like this area is more of the clover kind of stuff than this grass area that's a little darker. So I'm gonna make a little selection, maybe right about here. And I'm gonna let go of that key on the keyboard. I can start to see that selection in my brush. I can start to paint it on. That looks pretty good. It's got a little bit of some funky edges, but I can always go in with the spot healing brush and clean up those edges a little bit, make them look a little more gradual. Maybe go back with the spot healing or the clone stamp. Maybe make it a little bit smaller so I can fix some of these smaller areas. That looks a little bit better. Maybe with the spot healing brush, tidy up some of these dead patches. And so this is looking a little bit patchy, so maybe I need a little bit bigger of a brush for this area. All right, and that's looking pretty good. Maybe go back a step or two. There we go. All right, and then I have the third photo done. So then I can go up to File, Save, and save that photo as well. So I'm going to go up to File, File, Save As, on my computer, 3 removing things edited. It's in my Removing Things folder as a JPEG. And okay, now I have that third one finished. And for the fourth one, we're also going to be using any combination of the spot healing brush and the clone stamp. So they both work really well for different areas in this photo. And so what we're going to do with this photo is we're just going to remove all the junk in the yard. So I'm going to start with this little dog toy here. And so I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, about the width of that, with the spot healing brush. And I'm just going to paint over that to remove that, since that's a small, simple one to start with. Maybe this other thing here. Touch up those edges a little bit, any spots I may have missed. And then what I like to do with a lot of these is start out with a spot healing brush. If that doesn't work out, then use the clone stamp. And then sometimes when the clone stamp doesn't have the nicest of edges, then using the clone stamp and going back with a spot healing brush to tidy up those edges. So I'm going to make this maybe a little bit bigger, maybe about like that. And I'm going to see what the spot healing brush does with this. And so I'm going to go around the outline while I'm holding down the mouse, fill in the center, and then I think about it a little bit. It's a little patchy, so maybe go in a little bit and touch up the kind of corner areas. It wanted to put a big patch of clovers there, which looks a little out of place. So I'm going to touch that up a little bit. And I can always come back in with the spot healing, or the clone stamp, if I want to fix any of those areas later. But let's look over here at these buckets here. So again, I'm going to try the spot healing brush, see how that works. We can go a little bit smaller since we're really close to this other bush here. I don't want it to start to copy the bush over into the middle of the lawn. So I don't want to get too close to the bush. Let's see what that does. Oh, that worked pretty well. We just touch up a few little areas here. Looks a little bit better. And then we zoom out. You can't even tell that the buckets were there. So now let's try this one here. This is a little bit closer to a few other things. Let's take out this dandelion here so that it doesn't copy a bunch of dandelions onto the area we're painting on right here. Let's just start with this area, maybe go a little bit smaller for this broom handle. Kind of work our way over, maybe go a little bit bigger. You don't have to do the whole thing at once. You can start with a smaller area of it. It's trying to copy this tree over here, but we got some of that removed. And so what I can do to help with that is zoom in even closer so I get a real good look at it. I'm going to make the spot healing brush a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to go over just where it is right here. That's looking pretty good. Move that down there. Alright, so now that handle's gone. And now maybe going a little bit bigger. And now I'm going to try to select the whole thing. Let's see what that does. If that doesn't work, maybe I'll have to go into clone stamp a little bit. Oh, that doesn't look too bad. I just need to touch it up a little bit. Some of the random patchy spots that it made. Alright, that's not too bad. Let's see what that looks like zoomed out. That looks great. Now we just have a tricycle here, a wheelbarrow. If you want to take out this bell that's here, you can do that. Or if you want to remove any of the dead spots in the lawn, but we want to at least take out this tricycle, this tricycle here and the wheelbarrow. So the tricycle is overlapping with the shed here, so this area is going to be a little more complex. So I'm going to start with this other area here that's just surrounded by grass. And I might need a little bit of a smaller brush for this area. It's getting into a little more of a detailed area. Alright, it's copying some of that grass from over here, so we can come back to that. I just want to get the main areas removed and then go in a little more detailed. Good. Alright. So now I have most of that removed. And so I could always go in with the clone stamp here and fill in that grass that it added there that looks a little off. But I'm going to go back in and do that later. I'm going to focus on getting this tricycle handle removed. So let me go a little bit smaller and see what the spot healing brush does here. Oh, that looks pretty good. If the line on the edge of anything ever looks off, you can always use the clone stamp for that. I'm going to try to get these edges pretty good. What I can also do is with the clone stamp tool, if I make that smaller, I can go in and hold down Option or Alt and make a selection right on the line. That's the edge of this white area here. And I can line it up just right down here. Click and hold it so that it keeps creating that line. And the same thing on this side. I can make a selection right here. Move that edge right about there. And then I can paint over here and it'll keep these lines fairly straight. I can do that over here too with this little faint line. I can bring that down a little bit. I don't want to go too far because it's going to start painting blue onto this white area here, but I could go over here, make a selection, let's say right here. Line that up with this one. Maybe make a little bit of a smaller brush. Get this line more even here so that it meets up with that. Bring this line down a little bit, and this is all with the clone stamp. So now that looks pretty even, and I can go in my spot healing brush, have that fairly small, zoom in close, and touch up any of that might look a little off. These lines are a little wavy, so maybe I'm going to get the stamp clone again, make a selection up here, and then really small, paint it in. So that's a little more even. So then when I zoom out, it doesn't look like it was ever there. And then I have the wheelbarrow here. It's the last thing I'm going to remove. And so I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Zoom out just a little bit. Alright, so now I'm going to do the same thing I did with the broom handle, and with the spot healing brush, I need to be a little bit bigger. I'm going to try to just remove these little handles first. It's looking a little streaky, so maybe I'll go the other way with this tool to kind of even it out. And so with a lot of the bigger, more complex objects that we're removing, sometimes it helps to just start on the simple parts of it and get the smaller areas done and then work up to the bigger area of it. And sometimes it takes Photoshop and your computer just a couple moments to process this different selections you've made. Now let's see if I can go in with this wheel here. So you get a lot more precise corrections here when you have a smaller brush and you fill it in than if you do a really big brush for the whole thing. So it's looking a little funky, but that's okay. We're kind of working our way upward here. It is going to keep the shadow down here, so I might copy some of this other grass to fill in that shadow so it doesn't look odd once this wheelbarrow is totally removed. And I'm going to start kind of coming in from the top as well, see what that does. All right. Let's try filling in the whole thing. It might not look perfect at first, but we'll touch it up. All right, we can work with this. I'm just gonna fill that in a little bit with that spot healing tool. And it has a bunch of shadows here too. It's kind of copying this shadow. So at this point, we're just kind of moving those shadows around. It's not really removing it. So I'm going to go in with the clone stamp tool and bring in some other different textures and values of grass from other areas. So I can bring in this stuff a little bit over here, maybe some of this stuff over there. So let's see, let's make a selection over here, kind of fill that in a little bit. You can always make multiple different clicks. If you make one selection and you click over here and then you let go of the mouse and then you continue on and click again, it will still be coming from that same original selection, but it will be recreating that selection. So sometimes that makes the texture or the pattern kind of repeat. So if I make this selection here and I go over here and then I let go of the mouse and I keep going, it's going to keep making that kind of pattern of that same selection. So it's always good to kind of make multiple selections so you don't have this really fake looking repeating texture. We want it to not be super obvious that we took all this stuff out. So I'm going to make a few different selections, paint it on, maybe make a selection over here, put that on. You can always go in with the spot healing brush and go back and forth. Just a few things. The lawn is pretty patchy in this yard anyway, but we want it to look realistically patchy, not like we edited it and it's super fake kind of patchy. Touch up some of those little spots over there. And let's take a look at what it looks like zoomed out, kind of big picture. So that looks a lot better. You can always go in with the spot healing brush and touch up a few things. Grass is a very textured thing, so it can be a little more difficult to make it look realistic than it would if it was a different kind of surface. Things like pavement or a blank wall, those are a lot more simple to do if you're using these on any of your own photos. And this is as far as you really need to go, but if you want to get any more detailed, you can. If you want to zoom in and get real close up on things. Some people want to remove the bell here. You can definitely do that. There's some fence posts that kind of stand out with these white ends. So you could always take the spot healing brush and remove those, and no one would ever know that there's little fence posts in there. It can be kind of distracting. Anything that you want to remove from this photo beyond this, you definitely can. I just said remove the junk from the yard. Some people took that as removing the shed. If you think the shed is junk, you can remove the shed if you want. That is totally fine. If there's any weeds in the yard you want to take out, you could do that too. You can go as far with this as you want. There's this fence that's kind of in front of this other fence. If you don't like that, you could take that out with either of these tools. But I'm liking the way this looks. Maybe zoom in here. Looks like that plug does go into that outlet. That I find a little distracting, so I'm going to take that out so it's just grass. There we go. I'm liking the way that looks. So now I'm at a point where I can save this image. And so I'm going to go up to File, Save As, save on my computer, and for removing things, edited. That's my removing things folder as a JPEG, save, and OK. So now I have all 4 of my photos edited and saved. So if I go back into the folder that I got them from, either in Finder or File Explorer on Windows, and I go to my documents, photography, and removing things. I have my original, the edited version, original, edited version, original, edited version, original, and edited version. It's always nice to look at the before and after and see how much work you've done. So that is the removing things from photos assignment. We want to make sure we have all 4 of these edited with the spot healing brush and the clone stamp. If you want to also use these tools on your own photos, you definitely can. If you have any photos where you find something in the background to be distracting or any kind of thing you want to remove from it, then I really encourage you to use these tools on your own photos.